we think that asking for help shows a weakness or a vulnerability in it. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you don't ask for buy-in, what's the one thing you're not going to get?
Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Julie, I want to thank you for joining me on the show today. It's a real honor to get you finally all the way from Australia to join me on the show.
Thanks, Kurt. It's really exciting to be here as well.
So I went through your book, Buy-In, and I know you're doing a lot of speaking events. You're doing a lot of talks, especially around the subject of buy-in and getting people to buy into your ideas. And it's something that's very close to my heart. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved into this sort of leadership coaching and kind of what's your background?
So my background's well and truly in the project management space. If I go all the way back to uni for a second, I spent 2 years of my undergrad a computer science degree with a whole bunch of Steve Jobs wannabes at the time, and talking about tech and how it was going to be delivered. I'm really, really excited about the technology. But then I was just like, yeah, but this doesn't deliver itself, right? What's the mechanics of how websites get built and networks get built and programs get written? And so I went and did a project management elective, just random. Got to the turn in the road and went, I'm going to go and see what this project management thing's all about. And I sat in the first lecture and I was like, oh my God, this is suddenly starting to make so much sense. It took all the ones and zeros from my computer science world and well and truly put them like slap bang in front of you. Like, this is how you get stuff done. And from there, I pretty much went on a project management journey. I'm not an accidental PM. I didn't fall into this.
It's very deliberate.
It was very deliberate. My third year, I went to IBM in London. I worked at IBM for a year. I came out of graduation and I went to work for a financial services company on an IT transformation, and my career's just gone from there. So for all of your listeners, I've been a project administrator, coordinator. I've been the minute taker. I've been the timesheet recorder. I've you name it, I've done every role.
As long as it needed to be organized, you were there.
Yeah, if it needed to be organized, I was the girl. But what I found is as I got more and more experienced and more senior, I found myself surrounded by more and more and more important people. And it started to occur to me that as project managers and program managers, we have all of this responsibility in terms of delivery. But when it comes to accountability, we think that we have it and we don't. And we think we have people's support and often we don't. And to be honest, I got tired of being the person that got called to come in and fix projects. So about 2 years ago, I just said, why are all these projects broken? Why do they start with such fanfare? Why do you see the C-suite and the leadership team saying, this is the strategic direction of our organization. This is going to revolutionize what we do with our customers. And then they all fall flat. Like not just one or two, the majority of them fall flat. And so about 2 years ago, I started to get really interested in what are the points of difference on successful projects versus failed ones. And everywhere you look, people talk about executive support. So the Standish Chaos reports that the number one driver for success is executive support. The PMI, in every one of their focus on the profession reports, they all talk about underperformers in the project space coming from lack of sponsorship and executive support. And so that's why I started to get interested in it. And so I took my delivery hat on and put my teacher hat on, and now I speak and train and mentor on it because I don't think project managers know how to get buy-in. We think we have it and we don't.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And to your point about the executive buy-in, right? I've heard it before from leaders where they say, but this is why I hire smart people. Like, it's your job to deliver this project or make this thing come through. Why do you need so much of my time? This is why I hired you. This is why I hired smart people. And then they systematically, because of their uninvolvement, to your point, they wonder why things are not going the way they had hoped.
Yeah. I think if I could write an extra chapter in the PMBOK guide or in the Agile method, it would be something around understanding the environment that you're in. And I think even at the executive level, and more so at the project management level, that we forget that our project exists in this ecosystem called life, and we don't think about what else is going on. And it's only through falling over myself that I've learned to recognize some of the politics that exists in organizations, to understand some of the game playings, even at the highest levels of organizations, where the CEOs presented a strategy to the rest of the organization, but even their direct reports aren't necessarily all on the same page about the importance of everyone's got their different agendas. My last project for a major telco here in Australia was one of the most important projects in the organisation, yet every day I was still having conversations about resourcing and prioritisation and having enough funding and all of the other conversations that project managers have. And I think if we could do one thing better as project managers, it would be standing back and going, have I actually got everything? Am I in an environment, where this project is fully supported? And if I'm not, what do I need to get it? The analogy I use is it's like being a athlete on a running track. Most project managers think the gun going off or your project being approved is everything you need, but it's not. It's just the start of the race. And how quickly you run and how quickly you get around that track is entirely dependent on the support that you have. When you have engaged sponsors, a great team, your stakeholders are fully on board, you can pick up speed and run really, really fast. But if people are off working on someone else's project, or they don't show up to meetings, or they don't make decisions, guess what? You're just running around that track on your own. And the only thing that happens as project managers is you end up exhausted. You try and do everyone else's job, and guess what? You can't. You need their running with you.
Right. And because you're probably going to get all the blame when it doesn't go correctly. So, But I love what you're saying there, because it also translates to even the people who are the leads on projects, or even the people that are everything from developers to construction worker, whatever. Like it's also everybody's a project manager in some sense, right? Yeah. And you got to project manage your own time. It's not necessarily that you need that title, right? But this project manager specifically, I think that's what the interesting role for me is in what you're talking about, because I've had these conversations with folks, whether they be a lead on a project or a project manager or whichever, where they're like, this project isn't going right, and it's because my boss is a jerk, or the stakeholders or the clients don't know what they want. And I've definitely in the conversation where I'm like, but that's kind of your fault. That's your job to do that. And what I like about what's in your book is how you talk to somebody, but Julia, what if I'm that person? I'm frustrated and I'm like, they will just not get out of my way. And now you're telling me that that's my problem, Julia? Like, that just frustrates me. That just frustrates me even more, because they said they wanted this project done. They said they wanted it done on time. They said they wanted it done on budget, and they wanted all the features and all the things. And then they're in my way. Where do I start, Julia? Like, if I'm that frustrated person, where's a great place for me to start getting unfrustrated? Yeah,
I think so. The first part of the book, so the book's broken down into 3 parts. So I talk a lot about you as a person, and then I talk about your leadership, and then I talk about your project. And I think because a lot of project managers are quite outward facing, it's all about the project. We get to think about what we need as ourselves as people. And the first 3 chapters talk about confidence, clout, and courage. And I think when you're in a situation where you're frustrated and you're pulling your hair out and your project's not going anywhere, no one's going to solve that for you, like you said, right? So you have to kind of dig deep and look inside you, right? You can't solve that problem with a risk framework. You can't solve it with a report. It comes down to you. And so you've got to make a decision. Have you got the courage to go for it? If you haven't got the courage to go for it, what is it that's standing in your way? Are you not confident about working with senior leaders, or you're not good with conflict, or you don't necessarily think you've got the influencing skills? What is it that's creating that? What is it that's creating the frustration? Because I've been in places where I've been incredibly frustrated, but my biggest reflection is I was frustrating myself. You know, I was getting worked up and agitated. And if I look back now, I go, actually, there was a situation 5 years ago where I couldn't get an outcome in a meeting. And I went to the meeting. I prepped everyone before the meeting. I went to the meeting. Everyone was looking and understood the importance of the decision, but no one actually made the decision. And I left the meeting going, what is it?
What's wrong with these people?
Why can't they make this decision? This is like a no-brainer. Like I don't know what, you know, they want me to put it in 30-foot high letters. Like this is the decision that needs to be made. And I recognize now that it wasn't their problem; it was my problem. I hadn't communicated it well enough. I hadn't given them enough time for the decision to sit and think, because I was thinking about time, cost, and quality, and they're thinking about the future business decision, the future business direction, right? It's chalk and cheese in terms of our lens, and I think as project managers, if we can take our project management lens off sometimes and put our business lens on, we do a whole lot better. And my biggest learning is that it's us. Right? Yeah. I think I say in the book, my closing line in the book is that buy-in starts with you. And if you don't buy in to solve things, you're not going to solve them. You've got to go there. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And that story you told reminds me of one of my own stories, which is I did have a leader at one point, a stakeholder in definitely an important change project that was happening. And the metaphor I used was that they would say, go get me a rock. And I would bring them a rock, and they'd be like, "Not that rock. I want a rock. I want a different rock." And you bring them a rock, and they would say. And so, how have you? I'm sure you've dealt with that, Julia, before, where you're trying to get everything that everybody is saying they want, but nothing is sticking. It's really easy at that point to just blame them and go home frustrated, right? And just be like, they're dumb. Done. I'm done here. This thing's going to fail. All I can do right now is just cover my ass as much as possible so it doesn't blow back on me, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen, quite a bit, where it just becomes this CYA sort of approach that people will do instead of push through and try to really get to the other side of it. What ways do you coach people to kind of push through, moving from that, like, I'm just going to cover my ass to I'm going to own this?
I think the best advice I can give is try and look beyond scope. So most of my experience, most of the things that you just described, bring me a rock, no, not that rock, a different rock. It's generally about either people not knowing what they want, or they'll only know what they want when they see it, right, or they haven't done it before and they're not really clear on what it is that they want. But that's very scope-centric sort of conversations. So what I try and do and what I talk about in the book is what's the higher vision, right? So my last program was heaps of systems. Like, we're implementing 5 new systems across the whole business. There were lots and lots of decisions to be made, but we actually came up with some principles that were higher order guides, right? So one of the guides was, it's always about the customer. The customer is always first, right? So even if we don't know necessarily what the right thing to do is yet, when it comes to all of the decisions, the principle is that the customer's always first. That we're only going to implement what's out of the box. So if it's a choice between a process changing or the system changing, the process will always change before we ever customize the system. And what I found is, with my stakeholders, getting them to a place of, it's okay that you don't know what the rock looks like. We need to agree some things that help us decide when we find the rock that it's the right thing to do. Does that make sense? It's almost flipping their mindset a little bit to say, okay, the system can do all of these things, but the goal of the system is to improve the sales process, right? So every decision we make is going to be made in the frame of improving the sales process.
Right.
And we don't necessarily know what the improved sales process looks like yet, But if we make all of the right decisions in the right order, that's where we'll end up.
Right.
By default.
I love how you also say in the book, like, to that point, not just focusing on how people are thinking about stuff, but how they're feeling about stuff, and really diving into, when you're proposing those ideas, is not just gathering, like, what do you think about it? Like, how do you, try to figure out how they're feeling about it? Like, how is that affecting them? Because you also talked about being aware of fear and uncertainty that is most likely around you, especially when you're kicking off something or you're making a change somewhere. And that's something I think it took me a lot longer to figure out. Like, I figured I was working with a lot of very highly paid, very senior professional people that have been doing this a very long time. And it took me a long time to realize, they are scared. They have uncertainty. And how can I work with them to draw that out, to be able to kind of, let's not hide it in our baggage, right? Let's pull it out. Let's put it up on the wall. Let's figure out how to solve this thing, right?
Yes. Look, it was what I was going to say, that there's a worse job than being a project manager right now. It would be to be an executive. Like, you would not want to be an executive right now. And there's so much uncertainty, so much opportunity.
Yeah.
There's cost pressures. We're being smashed by resources, and everyone wants to grow. We've got all of this ambition, all of this potential. But what's standing in our way between potential and progress, in my view, is just fear. Right? There's no other reason why a good idea shouldn't work apart from your fear and inability to do it. And I think what we do as project managers is, the project's approved, everyone's agreed and aligned and ready to do this. But they forget about the uncertainty of the journey along the way. And executives aren't paid to be vulnerable and be scared, right? They're paid to lead. That's the culture of management for the last 30 or 40 years, if not longer. And I think many project managers don't go there in terms of conversation, because we don't want, that's a hard conversation to have, to go to an executive and go, what are you scared about?
Yeah.
Right. That's a confronting conversation. But if you go, okay, what does success look like? You can have that conversation. What are you most worried about? If we're sitting here in a year's time, what would you like us to have avoided, or what would you have liked us to do? And the feeling part is, and in the book I talk about people thinking and feeling. People will feel a response before they think. Right? What we do as project managers is we present all the left brain thinking stuff. Right? We'll smash them with business cases and facts and numbers and benefits, and we forget to tell them the stories. We forget to tap into their emotion. And one of my stakeholders from a few years ago did an amazing job of. I'll tell you a little bit about the project. We were offshoring some people from Australia to India. It was quite a controversial project because people's immediate feeling response was, I'm going to lose my job. You're getting rid of Australian jobs. And you would have organisations with similar challenges in the US. So people's immediate response, regardless of whether the numbers made sense, was, I'm going to lose my job. So how do you get people beyond that uncertainty and create an environment where they actually understand based on feeling? And the feeling that we're actually able to create is that we wanted to grow as an organisation, but there weren't enough people in Australia to be able to grow in the way that we wanted to grow with the skills that we needed. So what started as I'm going to lose my job view turned into this one of growth, whereas actually you're not going to lose your job. Your job's going to change from being this to this, and the bits of your job which can be done in India will be done in India. And that's that story, that feeling, that communication is not something you can represent in numbers in a business case or in a PMP or in user stories in a sprint. You can't capture that. That's functional left brain stuff. The right brain stuff. And stories could be, here's a story about a really bad customer experience. Get the customer in and get them to talk how bad more quickly your executives sit up and go, oh, okay, I've actually seen the person that had a really crap experience when they called the call center or had a bad experience with a product. That creates feeling. People will remember that person more than anything that's in the business case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
makes sense, because they're driven by feelings.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The thing that I like what you're talking about there, and I talk about it a lot too, which is establishing the vision for that thing. And I think that's one of the things that people struggle with, because sometimes these things, these initiatives, change programs or projects or whatever you want to, whatever sort of thing is going on is that the vision at first might be, well, we need to make dollars. we need to make money. And I've literally had stakeholders and people say like, well, what's the vision of this project? It's like, well, that we make a bunch of money, and I'm like, it's really going to get hard to get 30 people on board for that, unless there's profit sharing. I mean, then we can talk about that. But I've literally had to have those conversations where, to your point, I've gone to them and said, like, what does success look like? And they say money. And I say, okay, well, why is that important? And then, you kind of do that 5 whys sort of thing where you just, you just wear them down with whys until you actually get to what that impact really is, and then taking that and communicating that to the larger team and repeating it back to them to say, this is what I heard you say, and that makes a lot of sense. So I really like how you kind of you talk through that vision side of things, because that's where I've found that people struggle the most with is kind of defining a vision that isn't something that doesn't sound kind of like fairy dust and, like whatever, right? Or, some crazy, like, we're going to change the world, or some wannabe, like you said, wannabe Steve Jobs sort of approach, right? It's fine if the goal is to grow, and if growing means there's more money involved, but that growth also means other things. It means a bigger community of people that we're working with, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my last program, I went into, I think I was the 3rd or 4th program director to be given it. My boss told me that either I needed to make the program work, or if no one wanted it to exist, to shut it down. And I went into the program to tell me about the program, and people were like, oh, we're implementing 5 new platforms and we're going to simplify processes. And it's all very scope type language, right? We're going to use Agile, and they described the project to me perfectly. I got a really good understanding very quickly. But I'm just like, but why are we doing 5 new platforms? Why are we connecting them together? Why are we doing all of this work and spending all of this money? And what actually sat behind all of it was this beautiful message about simplification, digitization, improving customer processes, improving the employee experience, replacing old legacy systems, reducing the amount that we had to. The business case was just like a dream to write. You just sort of sat there and just wrote it, and it's just like you can see what the future is when you paint it in that way. If you just say, oh, we're implementing 5 new systems, it's a snore fest. Everyone implements 3 new systems. Why should if you need an entire organization or an entire department to come in and only care about your project in the first thing in the morning, if they don't care about it, they'll do something else. They'll go and get a coffee. They'll check their emails. They're not going to do the thing that you need them to do on your project because they don't see the bigger importance of it.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Let me ask you a more specific question. So let's say I'm, either I'm leading a team, whatever my title is, I'm leading a team. Maybe it's a new team. And because what I feel like in a lot of cases, when there's a new project or a new initiative in an organization or some sort of new change that people want to go through, it's not usually the team that has worked together a lot. You're bringing people together from different aspects. Maybe more likely than not, they've never worked together, and you got to spend time kind of doing some of that team building, but, nobody wants to do trust falls. Nobody wants to do, any of that.
Forming, storming, norming.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Project to deliver.
Right. Exactly. It's like, why can't we just get to work? Right. But have you experienced where maybe you've had somebody that you've worked with, maybe they're, for lack of a better word, like, a doer on the team, I think somebody that might be like dismissive, or they just don't want to talk to you. They just want you to leave them alone and they get their job done. So I've had this experience where I've spent that time getting the vision, working with that executive, just, doing everything I can to pull it out of them. Like, come on, like, let's get that vision, please. And then I get it. And then I go to the team and there might be like a couple of people and they're like, boy, like, so what?
Yeah, that's not the baby we want to deliver.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Like how have you navigated those waters, Julia, in a way, do you just walk around those people and you go to the people that are accepting of it? Like, how have you navigated those waters?
So I think, like, you touched on a really important point about bringing people together. And I think when you do bring people together, particularly early in a project, it's easy to assume that everyone is on the same page as you, right? And as project managers, I think we forget, because we can see a lot more, that we don't necessarily do a great job of communicating that into our teams very well. And I had a brilliant architect a long time ago now, 10 years ago, on a project that I led, customer-facing project. The customer was absolutely clear on the architecture that they wanted, because they had architects on their side. And my architect was just like, that's not the right architecture. There's a better way, better way of doing it. So I said, and so I was sort of looking at my options. I was like, well, he's got a different view to the customer. I'm not an architect, so he may be right, he may be wrong. I've got a time frame to hit. Do I want to open this can of worms, or do I want to keep the lid on? And so I could see he was quite disengaged from the first option, which is, this is what the customer wants, just get on with it. And so I said, okay, if you've got a different view, I'm happy for you to go and have a conversation with the architect on the customer side, but you've got a week, right? And because I need to have a clear architecture to go into design. We were running waterfall all the way back then. Mm-hmm. And I said, but if you go and talk to him, you've got to commit to, if either agreeing where you're going, or agreeing to disagree, but we're going to do what the customer wants. But I need you to come back and deliver it anyway. So I kind of gave him some free rein, but set the boundaries of, I need you to come back and be on board with whatever the answer is, because I'll support you. If the customer actually turned around and said that my architect made some excellent points, and we ended up adjusting things, and we ended up in a kind of middle ground between the two. Surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. But because my architect and the other architect agreed, both of them were naturally more engaged, and I think that was a great outcome. I've had other people on projects where they're just like, yeah, no, I'm just not part of this. And to be honest, that's where your courage comes in as a project manager. You need the right team. And if you've got people in your team that don't support the vision or aren't willing to roll up their sleeves, go and find another one. You haven't got enough time to mess around with people that are 60, 70, 80% committed, and then, taking long lunches and, naysayers on projects saying, well, yeah, project's great, but we're not doing what we should do.
Right.
or I told Julia this would never work.
Yeah. The I told you so is very helpful.
Told you so. Yeah,
very helpful. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Now go find a different job. So, that's the one thing that, what I really like that you talk about is that because I feel like some people are, especially in those project teams or things, that sometimes people are very comfortable with no decision for some reason, whereas the people, like you mentioned, that are accountable for the delivery of it, that's like the worst thing that could possibly happen, right? But you're surrounded sometimes by people that are just fine with making no decision. And I think that's sometimes when I myself personally have been the most frustrated is to say, well, to your point, I think that's a really good sort of way to approach it, is that if you're not willing to make a decision, I'm going to design some accountability for you in order to kind of force you to get down that path, whether you're into it or not. So I like how you kind of form that. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I think we forget sometimes on projects that everyone is there to make a contribution, and I think one of the chapters in the book is about contribution. What contribution are you going to make, and what contribution do you need from everyone else? And if people don't walk in the morning and know what that is, or what they're accountable for, like my architect, it's like, right, you've got a week to go and sort it out. Right? You're accountable for that part of you're accountable for the architecture of the project. You've got a week to sort it out. But if it's not sorted out, this is what we're doing. You're empowering them to get the outcome that they're looking for, rather than just going, yeah, thanks for your opinion. You're actually shutting them down, and that's not the right thing to do, I think.
Right. Yeah. Especially it might get you through that day, but 3 weeks from then, you're going to be paying for that.
Yeah. Or you're in testing and then you're wondering why it's not working. And then that conversation about the architecture comes back to you.
It does. It does. No, wait, no, that never happens. No, never happens. No. So let me ask you, Julia, like if I'm listening to Julia and I'm really interested in everything she's talking about, but you talk about that buy-in starts with me, right? Let's say I am feeling a little despondent and a little frustrated in the position I'm in, and I feel like I could be doing better, but people are either working against me or not working at all. Mm-hmm. Where do you start getting buy-in on yourself? Where's a great place to start holding up that mirror?
So what I do is, whenever I feel frustrated or uncertain about where to go, or that I feel like I'm missing something, I go and find a quiet spot and I just sit down and I close my eyes and I go, right, in my head, what does success look like? Right. It sounds kind of cliche, but this is what works. This is what works for me. What does success look like? What does crossing the finish line look like? And then in that picture in my head, I go, right, what haven't I got that's going to get me there? So am I missing a key stakeholder? Have I got resources in my team that aren't engaged? All the sorts of problems. Have I not got enough money? Have people not given me enough time? Have I got a couple of gnarly risks that are going to come and bite me? What is standing between where you are now and that vision? And then I sit down and I go through and I just literally just write them in a notebook. And then I go, okay, what can I do to solve that? It's almost writing a to-do list. Okay, right, to get that stakeholder on board. So you've got a decision. You can either go and get them on board on yourself, or you can go to a stakeholder that you have a good relationship with and enlist their support in getting that person on board. You could make a decision of looking at that stakeholder and go, in the grand scheme of things, actually, they're a pain in the ass, but I don't need them, right? So you make a conscious decision about what to do. And for me, that really just helps get what is a lot of feeling of uncertainty down into sort of tangible things that I can do. And in the back of the book, I talk about, where are people on a spectrum of, are they sabotaging what I'm trying to do, or are they helping me supercharge what I need to do? And that just visualizing what I want my project to look like and what's in the way of that vision, and then turning them into actions really helps me get clear on what I haven't got. And I think when you're drowning as a project manager, it's very easy to just sort of sit there and go, oh my God, this isn't right, and this isn't right, and this isn't right, and you focus on what's not right. But the buy-in starts with you message is actually, if you know it's not right, you have to turn that around and go, okay, I know it's not right, what can I do? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of us, if we haven't got the courage and we haven't got the confidence to go there, that we sit there and we go, I know it's not right, I'm going to choose to ignore it. But the only thing that's going to happen is sooner or later someone's going to come knocking. They're going to come and knocking about the fact that your project's late, that you spent all the money, or it's not right. Right. So it's just a decision on your own personal leadership, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, keep moving forward or get run over, I guess.
It's like it's that whole. I love that metaphor of the trains on the track. Do you want to be on it or in front of it? It's and it's. Before we started this, you were talking about leadership without authority, and I think project managers, we do lead without authority, but we have authority over what we decide to do.
That's a great way to put that, Julia. So let me ask you one last question I want to talk to you about and concept that I want to run past you. So that buy-in aspect, I really, really like it because I do coach a lot of people. I say it all the time on the show about why it's important to hold up the mirror first and think, what could I be doing better? What sort of change could I be making in order to get this thing that's stuck moving again? But one thing that I've actually found success with, and I want to get your opinion on, is having frank conversations with folks saying, I need buy-in from you. What can I do to get buy-in from you? Mm-hmm. Right? And have you found success in doing that? Because I feel like in some cases, me just walking straight up to somebody and saying, I feel like things are not going well, and I feel like you might be, thinking this isn't right, but I need your buy-in. I need it in order to make this thing successful. What can I do to get your buy-in? Have you had that experience?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in the world that are crap at asking for help.
Yeah, most people are bad at asking for help.
Yeah, because we think that asking for help shows a weakness or a vulnerability in it, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you don't ask for buy-in, what's the one thing you're not going to get? Buy-in, right?
Yep.
So, and if you put yourselves again in the shoes of your stakeholders, they may think that they've bought in. They may be sitting there going, yeah, I'm fully on board with this project. Right, but their version of buy-in and what your version of buy-in might be two different things. Their version of buy-in might be that they've signed off the project and that that you've got it completely under control. Whereas in your head, your version of buy-in is, no, you want them at the meetings, you want them to come to the lunch and learns, you want them to come and do the stand-ups. People aren't mind readers.
What?
Right? So if you,
what?
Yeah, I know. It's a crazy concept.
Man, that makes things so much.
You can't read my math.
That makes things so much harder, Julia.
It does. So, and I think, if you say it in a way that is moving forward, what are you missing? What do I need to do differently? What help can I give you? You're helping them, and then they'll go, oh, I thought I would. I am on board. I didn't realize that you think I'm not. It's a great relationship builder. Mm-hmm. If you go in and say you weren't at my meeting, you haven't made a decision, if you put it all in the negative, you're going to end up in an argument. But if you put it in a forward view, exactly as you just described, I love that. And I really need your buy-in on this. I really need your support. There aren't many execs out there that I know, or stakeholders out there that I know, that would be a real, well, thanks for asking for my help, but you haven't got it anyway.
Right.
They don't. They're not. They're just trying to do a good job like everyone else. Or if they can't, or if they've. I had a stakeholder a few years ago who was very involved in my project one minute and then almost absent the next day, and. We sort of trundled on for a couple of weeks, and I was sort of like, I'm noticed your absence. And he actually had a significant change in his personal life. Right? He was going through a divorce and had a custody battle with his kids. Right? So he'd gone from being fully involved in work to actually, no, this is my priority at the moment is I need to be at home. Right? And so some of that stuff you're just not even aware of, right?
Right.
You're there delivering the project. And he turned around and he said, look, I'm sorry I fell off the face of the planet. Let me get some of my direct reports involved. And they've got my full delegation. And when I'm back on board, you'll have me back. Right. But it's just, we've got to be willing to have the conversation, and courage and being vulnerable and open about what you need is key, I think.
Yeah, so that's really great. One last question, and then we'll wrap up here. But with that, so that's a great example of somebody who maybe has some hidden sort of challenges that they're dealing with outside of the project that are affecting it. But what about somebody who's just outright toxic? Somebody who showed up on the wrong side of the bed, and they're a grumpy Gus or grumpy gal that's showing up every day and just kind of toxic. How have you approached those situations in a way where you've found success, or maybe even not found success? I have plenty of examples of where I've not found success with that, so I could save that for another day.
Yeah, I think so. The first thing you've got to understand is whether they're grumpy Gus to everyone or if it's just your project. Because I've had stakeholders that were absolute nightmares, but then I realized when I inquired with other people, they were nightmares with everyone.
Okay.
So it's like, well, okay, I'm glad it's not just my project. Like there's a bigger problem here than them just being grumpy with my project. But then you have to decide, okay, if they're grumpy about my project, what to do about it. And I think it's the decision you need to make really comes down to how much you need them. Now, I've had stakeholders that were grumpy, that were sort of on the periphery, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I only really need to see them at the stand-up or the steering committee. We talk occasionally in between. They are doing what they need to do. They're not necessarily great to work with, but I can live with them. And that's just a decision that you need to make. But I've had people that were grumpy. I had a really grumpy sponsor, and I actually had to have the conversation of, you're the leader of the project we are the leaders of the project together. We're setting the tone of what we're delivering together. And I need you to, here's some things that I need your help changing. And if they are a good leader, I say if, that they should change, right? They may not know that they're actually outward projecting negativity, and they may not know what you actually need them to do. So having that conversation is a good one. I had a project a long time ago where I actually pursued a change of sponsor, but that's hard, especially if the person that you need is the natural sponsor, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You can't go and give a finance project to be sponsored by marketing, right? You need the finance guy or girl. You need to be willing to have the conversation. I feel like I said that a few times in this session, but it is a conscious choice. Do you live with them? Do you live with it, or do you do something about it? And from my experience, trying to do something about it might not get you the exact outcome you're looking for, but at least it will make some changes. And no one lays in bed at night thinking, oh, I'm glad I was a real pain in the ass to that project manager today. They're just going about doing their job.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. You sometimes you can overthink like how deliberate you think other people are being, especially when it comes to that. And I like that you said that, because I've had that experience before about deliberately going to change I've had that experience where I've gone and said, I need to talk to your boss, to a stakeholder, and with some luck and sometimes without luck. But that was a really scary thing to do. I wasn't used to, being in that position and having to go. I was definitely used to having people go over my head all the time. Yes. But then when I, like, as you said, like, I feel like I had the confidence to go and say, this thing's all going to go downhill unless I find somebody new to lead it on the other side. And that was a very difficult conversation. But, I think as you mature in your roles, you kind of learn that managing up is just as important as, or if not more, than managing below you.
Yeah, I get asked quite a lot around, either through my training or speaking, what do I see the role of a project manager, and what do I think the most important thing to remember is? And to me, a project manager has just got a single job, right? The job is to turn the potential of an idea into progress and performance, right? That's all we're there. It doesn't matter what the idea is. It doesn't matter what framework you use. What you're there to do is to turn an idea into an outcome. And I think we lose sight of that in all of the stuff that we've got to do. Mm-hmm. But every decision we make, the amount of effort that we put in, who we choose to work with, who we choose to ignore, the confronting conversations that we have to take, they're all decisions on a path from turning it in from an idea into an outcome. And I think if we aren't more conscious of that, that's when things go off the rail. You know, I don't take on projects to deliver bad ones. I'm sure most of your listeners like the thought of making sure every project they deliver is a successful one, but it's just a series of decisions that we have to make. That's the only thing that differentiates a good project from a bad project in my mind.
That's great, Julia. Well, Julia, we're at time, so I want to thank you again. I learned a lot in this and from your book. If I'm interested in learning more about what Julia's got going on and where I can find the book and maybe where I can maybe join for a webinar or any of these types of things, where's a great place for me to go?
So you can go to my website, juliasteele.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So just all the usual social media platforms, I'm there. My shop has my book in it. It's available hard copy and ebook too. So yeah, feel free to check it out.
Great. Yeah, I'll make sure to have links on the blog post with all the things to find more about Julia. So yeah, one last time, I just want to thank you, Julia, for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, likewise, Kurt. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to The Schmidt List. If you want to learn more about how Foundry accelerates innovation, check out foundrymakes.com. And if you'd like me to speak about establishing a growth mindset at your conference or with your team, drop me a note at kurt@foundrymakes.com. Oh, and the next time you're on the internet, head to iTunes and leave the show a review. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I hope you have a fantastic week.